They were out early one morning, panning in the stream for gold, surrounded by the rising mountains. Old prospector with a tale for two, he brushed around in the pan, pointing out what lay within was ordinary sand. He began with his story about 20 years before, and a younger man who sought his fortune. With a tear or two he told of searching for his treasure, but making known the gold he sought was ordinary pleasure. There were years of doing without, and there were years of plenty. I started thinking that life was never steady, excepting when the bills came in and I had no money to pay. Whiskey had never tasted better ordinarily. Concluded his story as it filled the air with a laugh, saying how he found the Lord and Savior, and how he found the river of life by which his day unfolds, and pointing out what stands within is not ordinary gold, and pointing out what stands within is not ordinary gold. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. Through His word we can see His wonders, signs and miracles of His love. We can return His love with devotion, standing on His word before all men. We are His beloved and His chosen, walking in this life renewed with peace. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. upon His promises. Through His Word we can see His wonders, signs and miracles of His love. We can return His love with devotion, standing on His word before all men. We are His beloved and His chosen, walking in this life renewed with peace. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. Believe upon His promises.
All right, welcome. This is Mark Wallace at True North Studio, and today the topic is beating back the spirit of fear. Beating back the spirit of fear. Sort of interesting topic. When my oldest brother got his driver's license, he quickly put a huge crease in the left side of our family's red and white 1961 Volkswagen microbus. Hey, it was the 70s. The other 5 of us Wallace kids couldn't wait to see what Brett's punishment was going to be. It was going to be wonderful. Grounded for a week, pay for all damages, sentenced to hard labor under our resident slave master, Grandma D. It had to be something really, really bad. My mom shocked us when she told us, when she told him just to get back in the van and drive around for a while, alone, all by himself. Now my pea-sized red-headed brain was perplexed. It was confused, baffled. So I asked her why. And she said something I'm never going to forget. She goes, I don't want him to build up a fear, so I made him get back into the van and drive. And that's how we were taught to beat back fear. Jump back in and drive. Now today we cover a topic that may hit close to home. We're going to discuss fear, but not just any fear. We're going to talk about something called the spirit of fear. It's a bit different. It kind of runs the world. Just hear me out. The spirit of fear is a weird duck. It's not the same as our usual run-of-the-mill therapist couch fear, or that forgot your cell phone at home type of fear. This one hangs out in the shadows until it's no longer noticed and slowly becomes a part of who you are. It molds you into whom it wants you to be, not who you want to be. Is this fear a spirit, a demon, a devil, or is it simply a behavior? What is this spirit of fear? Can this spirit of fear be beaten or controlled? Can it be thrown to the ground like a jujitsu master? Or is it like an invasive weed like poison ivy, so integrated into society that you just need to find a way not to touch it? Well, the Bible gives us a graphic case study on this thing called the spirit of fear. It even gives us a few suggestions on how to deal with it. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, For God hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind. Well, it sounds simple enough, but it's not. From failed diets to most of the garbage you see on the news, to actually biting your tongue and not answering the dreaded question, does this dress make my butt look big? The spirit of fear works quite effectively against all personal callings. It has a master's degree in redirecting our love and is bastardly good at reducing our self-control. It gets you to forget about your dreams, overlook your life calling, and focus on something else, anything else. By the time we're adults, we're so used to not doing what we were put on earth to enjoy doing that we no longer even realize what's at stake. Have you ever started getting in shape and losing weight, but slowly gave up and went back to your old habits? Then you've watched TV with the spirit of fear. Have you ever felt the need to help others and you quit? Well, you held hands with the spirit of fear. Have you ever started writing a song or a book, a screenplay, or your personal memoirs and gave up on it? Then you got sweet-talked by the spirit of fear. If you've ever said, I'll get started on it tomorrow, then you know the whisper of the spirit of fear. If you have ever woke up in the middle of the night and almost figured out how to solve that problem, but eventually just let the dream fade, that's the spirit of fear. If you have ever gone through some sort of trauma, be it physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, if you've been in a bad accident, been to war, have battle fatigue, shell shock, PTSD, then you've locked eyes with the spirit of fear. If you've ever destroyed a perfectly good marriage, then you dated the spirit of fear. The spirit of fear will tell you anything to keep you from living your gift. The spirit of fear is always lying and is always full of crap. The spirit of fear's only job is to stop you from doing what you were put on this earth to do. As long as you continue to be an evolving, growing, adventurous, and a giving person, you will never eliminate the spirit of fear, but you can learn to beat it back. The more important something is to your personal growth, the more the spirit of fear will be there to slow things down and mix things up. Eve tasted it. Moses ran away and hid for 40 years because of it. David slept with it. Judas betrayed the Christ because of it. Timothy went into stop over it. Like a soccer parent, the Spirit of God yells to us from the sideline screaming, "Get back up!" But the spirit of fear is that trash-talking, opposing player, always probing, doing anything to get you off your game. You know the type. We all have a calling. We all have a purpose, a life's dream, a reason to get out of bed in the morning. We all have some special mojo that the world needs. The spirit of fear will try anything to talk you out of your gift, your calling, your passion, your dream. It will also go after anything that refreshes you. Let's jump back in and drive. Let's figure out how to beat back the spirit of fear. Side callings. Now here's something you may not have considered. And I've got to let this thought breathe a little bit. I just mentioned the importance of our main life calling, but did you know that you also have side callings, and they may be just as important? If you're a counselor who loves to ballroom dance and you put away your dancing shoes because you're too busy helping other people through their problems, do you think it'll affect your work? Yep. If you're an evening gardener who works for the government by day and you eventually stop gardening after work, will it be a sacrifice? You bet. If you give up running or working out or singing karaoke or enjoying your hobby, if you stop painting or playing music or fishing or you stop sport shopping like my wife, will it suck the air out of your room? Probably. Most certainly. To give up on your side calling just to make more money is a huge mistake. We all know that our side callings, our hobbies, our sports are not the most important contribution to humanity, but we also know they're an essential part of us and need to have their place in the sun. Your side callings are what give you the room to breathe. Side callings refresh you so you can do what you were placed on earth to do. Side callings help you have the energy to beat back the spirit of fear. God knows something inside of you will wither if you quit on your side interest. The spirit of fear is well aware of that too. So don't ignore your hobbies, your passion projects, any more than you would your main gift to this world. So throw the canoe back in the water, restring your guitars, cast in a line, lace up those trail shoes, start writing that book, rekindle that adventure. Let's throw the spirit of fear off its game. Our hobbies, our passion projects, our side callings all help us beat back the spirit of fear. Now, Timothy, a case study on the spirit of fear. Now, how would you like every Christian in the world to know your secret fears? Not so much. Not so much. Paul wrote to his friend Timothy, trying to help him with his little fear problem. And somehow that letter got passed around, copied, and reprinted millions of times over the past 2,000 years. And here's what Paul told Timothy. 2 Timothy 1:7 from the AMP. For God did not give us a spirit of timidity or cowardice or fear, but He has given us a spirit of power and of love and of sound judgment and personal discipline, abilities that result in a calm, well-balanced mind and self-control. Now, once again, I ask you, is the spirit of fear that Paul is pointing out to Timothy an actual devil spirit called the spirit of fear, or is it simply bad habits? Does it matter? Does it matter? After all, they both came from the same father. They're evil twins. Now, what's cool is we're about to find out they're both dealt with the same way. They're both dealt with the same way. Anything that slows down the real you or gets you to quit on yourself has been infected by the spirit of fear, cowardice, and timidity. The spirit of fear sets you up for a life the younger you would never have chosen. I'm going to say that again. The spirit of fear sets you up for a life the younger you would never have chosen. Let's see how Paul tried to push start Timothy through his own personal valley of death, hoping to get his engine running again. Now, we all deal with different fears at different times in our life. All of us. Your fear, your hesitation, the behavior change that almost got you to quit on your gift was different than Timothy's. So be kind to the boy. Actually, by the time Paul wrote this letter, Timmy boy was in his 40s. Typically, our 40s should be our peak performing and earning years, unless something's interrupted the flow. Now let's unwrap Paul's case study on dealing with this life waster called the spirit of fear. Background on Timothy. The Timothy of the Bible was raised in an interracial household. His dad was Greek and his mom was raised as a Judean. Very taboo, very taboo. She believed in the Christ, but his dad didn't. His mom got involved with this Christianity thing soon after the original day of Pentecost. Timothy was a man of two cultures and was seamless at both. When most kids were trying to navigate the high school pecking order, Timothy's mom and grandma allowed him to navigate life by utilizing his spiritual gifts. Timothy realized he could walk by the Spirit long before his classmates memorized the Pythagorean theorem or snuck behind the Colosseum to steal a kiss from their favorite boy or girl. To add a little color to Timothy, he traveled the world with Paul. He spent time with Peter, broke bread with Titus, sat with Silas, barnstormed with Barnabas, met with Mark, even got to meet Jesus' half-brothers James and Jude. Timothy heard all of Luke's stories many times as he traveled the Mediterranean. Why was young Timothy chosen to travel and minister with Paul and Luke as they voyaged the known world? Well, Timothy was handpicked because a man's gift makes room for him. The reason Timothy was asked to travel with the Apostle Paul was because he was not afraid to openly use his gifts. Even as a teen, he was crazy good at his God-given talents. The boy shined. Timothy was allowed to hang around the amazing people because he too was amazing to hang around with. First off, Timothy was no wimp. He was tough. He had spent 25 years away from home, sailing the world on open ships, eating different foods, debating with the educated, and socializing with people from many cultures. Plus, he was smart enough to evade deadly persecution. Think of Timothy as a cross between the adventure-seeking Indiana Jones with the swashbuckling confidence of Captain Jack Sparrow, all the while flashing the radiant smile and bulging muscles of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and having the ethics of the Mandalorian. This is the way. Timothy was a badass with heart. Like Luke, a physician who quit his practice to travel with Paul, Timothy also donated his time and life to spreading the gospel, traveling the world, and utilizing his gifts. By the time 2 Timothy was written, Timothy had traveled with Paul for maybe 25 years. That's a full career, folks. Paul would now have been mid-60s. Timothy was in his 40s, like I said earlier. There's no mention of a wife, kids, or grandkids. He may not have owned any property, no retirement, no legacy. And here's where the plot thickens. Like many of you ministers and artists and musicians and teachers and doctors, moms, first responders, and military men and women, Timothy gave it all for the cause. He gave it all. He literally gave his earning years in service to God and others until now. Now. But something happened in Timothy's massive heart that froze him. The spirit of fear kept working him until he finally quit on his calling. But don't be too hard on old Timothy. We've all succumbed to the same siren's call a time or two. Trust me, I sure have. Now let's analyze Timothy's hidden fear. Remember, it may be different than yours. Okay, it may be different than yours. The fear that finally wore Timothy down was shame. Shame. Now again, I need to remind you, the spirit of fear is not the scaredy cat kind of fear. It's something more sinister, more hidden, more social, more individual. 2 Timothy 1:8, be not thou therefore ashamed of the testimony of our Lord, nor of me his prisoner, but be thou partaker of the afflictions of the gospel according to the power of God. See, Timothy was ashamed of two basic things. One, he was ashamed of Jesus Christ. And two, he was ashamed of Paul. Now, being ashamed of Paul was easy because he was in prison. Again, being ashamed of the testimony of our Lord is being ashamed about the life and accomplishments of the Christ. Are you shocked? Are you shocked? To explain, has society ever gotten you to shut up about someone or something you really believed in because the groupthink of social media told you it was not cool? If so, you've been targeted by the spirit of fear. To understand Timothy's hesitation and trepidation, we need to understand the culture and the times in which he lived. In less than 35 years, this brand new thing called Christianity had spread around the entire Mediterranean Sea and across the entire Roman Empire. Timothy was a big part of it, but things were changing. Things were changing. At first, the word spread because Christians were excited and because some relocated for fear of religious persecution, like people moving to areas that coincide with their political or religious beliefs. They still do it today. Maybe like the reason you left that church or that city or that state way back when. But the societal discrimination against Christians was now growing to epic proportions. In 60 AD, it had become open season on Christians. The Romans piled on and attacked the believers with a vengeance unparalleled in modern times. But they keep trying today. When politics become people's religion, we're all in for a world of hurt. To stand out in first century Roman culture was inviting trouble. And did Timothy ever stand out? So do you. Besides political expediency, it became popular and funny to call the Christians cannibals. It was all over the social media of the day. They called them man-eaters because the believers constantly talked about the benefits of eating the body and blood of Jesus. Today we call it communion. Communion! The Romans were scared as hell of cannibals because of their experience trying to tame the man-eating Celts in Britain. They knew the Christians weren't really cannibals. It was just humorous, intimidating, and got them to shut up at a party. You ever been at a party with a brand new excited Christian? Then you know what I'm talking about. To further put the Christians on their heels and to add insult to injury, this communion thing that the Christians nicknamed their love feast sounded awfully close to what the Romans called an orgy. It didn't matter that the agape feast was just a meal together, fully clothed, talking about the accomplishments of the Christ. Now, once again, communion. Now, being called a Christian was becoming a schoolyard joke and dangerous. Everyone began to attack. These embarrassing rumors were released to silence the Christians, much like our media does today. Christians became ashamed of being, well, Christians. Plus, being noticed is not always a good idea around people who have conquered the world. The Romans hated anything or anyone who was different. The Romans weren't racist as we think of racism. They didn't care about the color of your skin or the backwater country you came from. As long as you dressed, ate, spoke, thought, and believed in their gods and rules, you were just fine. That's all you had to do. This was hard for the early Christians because they didn't play well with pagans in power, and Christian behavior was weird to the Romans. The Emperor Nero went so far as saying that the followers of Christ were non-humans and haters of humans. Just for fun at outdoor parties, the emperor may have Christians slathered in tar and set on fire to become running, screaming light shows with flaming jazz hands. This was early Roman pyrotechnics. At other times, Nero would have Christians bound in freshly slaughtered animal hides while he and his party sipped a nice vintage of wine. They would watch in glee as packs of feral dogs would sniff them out, surround them, and tear the Christians from limb to limb. But what brought about the greatest applause from the bloodthirsty Roman fans was the warm-up act just before the gladiators entered the arena. They would chain an unarmed Christian or some other criminal to a post or a huge stone and then release starving lions or some other hungry beast into the stadium. I once saw such an arena when I visited Pompeii, Italy. In the center of the 2,600-year-old amphitheater was a huge stone buried flush with the ground, and the rock had a single metal ring sticking out of it at its midpoint. And I asked my tour guide what it was for, and never looking up from her cell phone, she said in her bored, monotone, broken English, "This is where they would chain up Christians for the lions to eat before the gladiators came out." Yawn. Timothy was raised in that desensitized bloody culture. He knew everything about it. He also knew how to fit in and had easily evaded personal attack, imprisonment, and death for maybe 25 years. He knew all too well that the life expectancy of a Christian was less than that of someone who participated fully with the Roman state religion and lifestyle. But Timothy's fear spun him into retrograde motion. Timothy's slow, debilitating shame will make sense to you when you realize that one of the major symptoms of what we call PTSD is shame. Do you think Timothy was slightly traumatized by what he saw and had to avoid for over 20 years? What about his Christian friends being brutalized and killed right in front of him? Maybe in a stadium. What about all those years you lived on the edge? What about all those years? Do you want to repeat them? Did Timothy want to repeat them? Timothy thought Paul shot up his mouth again and got himself thrown in prison again. Now he's asking me to travel halfway around the world just to walk in and visit him at the Roman Supermax? What if they grab me too? My friend just died trying to help him out. Well, this kind of fear, when silently repeated to yourself over and over, wears at you. Timothy had long ago given up any hope of living a normal life, but he still wanted to live. He never built a career, never had a wife or raised a family, never stayed in one place. He had left his friends and family behind 25 years earlier to travel with Paul. He also knew what happened to his friends Onesiphorus, Demas, Titus, and many others. He knew that almost all the believers back home in the northeast Mediterranean had already turned their backs on Paul's gospel and went back to their old lives. 2 Timothy 1:15. 2 Timothy 4:10 also says, "For Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world, and is departed unto Thessalonica, Cretans to Galatia, Titus from the Bible unto Dalmatia." They all turned their backs on Paul and the gospel. The weight of the world, the Roman threat, dangerous politics, and most of his friends leaving Paul's traveling ministry show was a secret burden of shame that weighed Timothy down like a millstone, and he felt every pound of it. Being ashamed of what you believed was a growing Christian fear, a cancer in 65 AD. This being ashamed of Jesus Christ and Paul was the fear that froze Timothy and many others. Also, the debilitating shame of giving up on his own calling stopped his forward progress and shut down his personal ministries. This is the way of the spirit of fear. The second use of shame. In the second verse on shame, Paul takes another swing. This time he handles the believing in God and His Son Jesus Christ piece. Paul says he's decided not to let shame stop him. Shame was a real temptation in 65 AD, or being ashamed. 2 Timothy 1:12, for the which cause I also suffer these things. Paul also suffered those things. Nevertheless, I am not ashamed. For I know whom I have believed, and I am persuaded that He is able to keep that which I've committed unto Him against that day. For all you word study gurus, it's interesting to note that the word not in I am not ashamed is the word not with feeling. It's more like, I've decided I'm not going to feel ashamed today. I don't have the time today to get all angry and upset because of what people are saying about me and the Christ. I will not allow these idiots to steal my peace today. I'm just not feeling the fear. Namaste. Did you ever realize that shame was also the thing that actually froze Adam and Eve? It was. Why else would you try to hide yourself from God? The Garden of Eden is where the spirit of fear cut its teeth. Paul faced the same social and political and economic fears as Timothy, but for some reason they didn't stop him from using his gift. We're all different. We're all different. While in a deadly Roman jail or prison, Paul wrote Ephesians and Philippians and Colossians and Philemon and 2 Timothy. Have any of you ever been in a third world jail or prison? It's not such a nice place. As a teen, I experienced many small-town Texas jails with their green metal bunk beds and no blankets and no food and mean inmates and hateful guards, but they were nothing like the prisons that Paul somehow was able to thrive in. I can't imagine trying to write an epistle while in there. I don't know how he did it. Now, what stops one person doesn't always affect another. Some people are better at allowing the fear of social pressure to roll off their backs. Others aren't. Think of social media bullying today. The real question is, do you realize that what stops you from doing, what stops you from doing you? Do you realize that? What stops you from doing you? Could it be the spirit of fear? You may want to answer yes. Anything that stops you from being the best you is always the spirit of fear, directly or indirectly. Always. Other things wore Paul down, but not shame. Shame affects me, but not all the time. 3 times people tried to kill me as I was speaking the word to them, twice with pistols. Even while the cold steel bruised my ribs, it didn't stop me from speaking the word to them. I'm sort of weird that way. But other things stopped me. The simple cares of the world have rusted my gears at times. I mean to tell you. Or thinking that I had what it took to repair another man's broken ministry once slowed me down to a desert death crawl. I think I even noticed a vulture circling overhead, watching and waiting. What stops you? What moves you to inaction? Notice the play on words there. What moves you to inaction? What gets you to quit on yourself or on your gift or your diet? At its deepest root, my friends, that would be none other than the spirit of fear. Remember, the spirit of fear has been around at least since the first true humans, complete with body, soul, and spirit, walked with power in Eden. Paul was simply telling Timothy that he and others aren't always affected with shame the same way Timothy was. The spirit of fear is personal, and it knows how to stop you. Do you know how to back it off? The third use of shame. Now we're going to look at the third and final mention of shame in this spirit of fear section. Now here's our concluding usage of shame in Paul's letter to Timothy. This one breaks my heart. 2 Timothy 1:16. The Lord give mercy unto the house of Onesiphorus, for he often refreshed me, and was not ashamed of my chain. But when he was in Rome, he sought me out very diligently, and found me. The Lord grant unto him that he might find mercy of the Lord in that day. And in how many things he ministered unto me at Ephesus, thou knowest very well. He was writing that to Timothy. Now here the Greek word for not ashamed has nothing to do with feelings. It means that Onesiphorus abso-freaking-lutely felt no shame because Paul was in prison. Not even a twinge, not a skosh, none. Onesiphorus was absolutely not ashamed of what people said because Paul was locked up. He didn't care. He could care less. But Timothy allowed the shame game to kick his behind. Paul closes out this section on controlling the spirit of fear by mentioning a man Timothy knew very well, Onesiphorus. Paul is pulling out all the stops now. He wants Timothy to move in spite of his fear. In spite of what all his other friends have done. Remember, they left? In spite of the danger, just like he had done for 25 years. There was only one major prison in Rome in the first century. It was a chamber built 4 to 5 meters underground. Prisoners were literally dropped into the dark cavern. There was one way in and one way out through a manhole maybe 12 feet above the floor. Look up the Mamertine prison in Rome. This is one of the places where Paul wrote his epistles. I don't know how. Paul mentions how Onesiphorus came to Rome and had a hell of a time finding the hole in which the Romans had hidden him. Onesiphorus found Paul at great cost to himself and his family. The terms give mercy to the house of Onesiphorus and finding mercy in the Lord's day is a soft way of saying that this man had recently died. Paul is telling Timothy that Onesiphorus had passed away trying to help him. What do you think that did to Timothy? Paul's also addressing this part of the letter to anyone who knew this man's family. It's the equivalent of what we know today as a GoFundMe site. In that culture, there was no welfare, no government relief, no homeless shelters, no stimulus checks. Without a husband and dad, the family was about to face some really hard times unless someone kicked in and helped. They would need mercy, compassion, the kindness of others just to survive and to live. Paul also needed mercy to stay alive while he was in that hole that was the Mamertine prison. Onesiphorus was the guy. He was the guy who brought Paul food, clothing, writing supplies, but now he's gone. He's dead. He's dead. Timothy was asked to pick up the slack where Onesiphorus had left off. What the Romans called a prison was only a holding tank for criminals until trial, which usually ended up in death by crucifixion, death by wild animals, or death by gladiators. Did any of you notice that the word mercy was used twice in that section? The word mercy here means active compassion, not withheld judgment like a lot of us were taught. Paul is saying by revelation that Onesiphorus will be super blessed and wonderfully rewarded in the future. But I think the family really needed his help right then. Timothy felt every word. From the context, we know that Onesiphorus literally gave his life in helping to find and care for Paul. Did his sacrifice make a difference? Did it? Think about it. We may not, have certain parts of the Bible if it wasn't for fearless men like Onesiphorus. Did his legacy inspire Timothy to break through his fear and act? We don't know. We really don't, because the Bible doesn't say. We have no idea. A Roman prison was not like an American prison. Justice was not speedy, and there were not 3 meals a day. If you were going to live, it took people on the outside to bring you blankets, clothing, reading materials, and sometimes food. They had to give at their own expense. They had to gain access to the prison. They had to give the required bribes to the guards and try to get the food and clothing and reading materials all the way to the prisoner that they wanted it to. And other people, don't you think the other prisoners wanted to take it away from them? You know, Onesiphorus had done that for Paul over and over and over, and it cost him his life. Onesiphorus was absolutely not ashamed of Paul's imprisonment, which means he was also fearless in the face of the Romans. The Romans didn't like people who were not afraid of them. Those people were outliers, deviants, and troublemakers. Maybe like you. Onesiphorus was one tough hombre. That also reminds me of you. You see, Onesiphorus' love, his care, his fearless action in the face of danger cost him his life, and his family paid a high price for his service. Some of you can relate. I knew a young minister who saw a woman being mugged on a mean street in New Jersey. And he ran up and grabbed the attacker to pull him off of her. The man turned and shot him right through the heart at close range. He left a wife and 5 little kids. That family needed help for years. I kept up with them. Did my minister friend do what was right? Did he do what was right? What would Timothy have said? What would Paul have said? What would Onesiphorus have said? What would Onesiphorus' wife and kids have said? They're all a little bit different, aren't they? You know, without Onesiphorus' sacrifice, we would not have 2 Timothy and maybe a few other epistles. Was his fearless attitude worth it? Well, to his wife and kids, probably not. But to the millions of us who've learned from Paul's letters, the answer is hell yes. To care about what other people said about the Christ and Paul caused Timothy to freeze, and his shame ate him up on the inside. Shame was the mindset, the personal petri dish of the spirit of fear for Timothy. Now putting fear into the spirit of fear. The spirit of fear is anything that stops you from bringing out the best of you. You know, one more time with 2 Timothy 1:7. For God hath absolutely not given us a spirit or mindset of fear, but He has absolutely given us the ability to walk with power and of love and of a sound mind. Right in that verse is God's 3-part antidote to that sneaky fear, regardless if it's an actual spirit or just a personal weakness, or a long-time behavior, or just crazy emotionally charged time in our lives. When we accept that God already gave us the tools to deal with any type of fear, our life takes on a different hue. Things that have been stopping us look smaller. The 3 words that cure the spirit of fear are power, love, and sound mind. But what do they mean? These are learned behaviors. They're not God's job. These are 3 things we decide to do. You know, they're the environment that is just outside the reach of the chained dog I keep calling the spirit of cowardice. These can help you beat back the spirit of timidity so you can be the person you were designed to be and do what you were put on earth to do. Galatians 5:16, this I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are the contrary the one to the other, so that ye cannot do the things that ye would. Doesn't need much explanation. I must point out that these 3 cures, power, love, and sound mind, are Paul's fruit of the Spirit. They're in Paul's fruit of the Spirit list in Galatians 5. They're also in Peter's theater virtues checklist in 2 Peter 1. They're even mentioned in Paul's list of how to beat back the spirit of fear in 2 Timothy 3. That's 2 chapters from what we've been reading. I need to add here that right next to every list of fruit or virtues is a list of bad behaviors we should probably avoid. The lengthy list of what Paul calls lust of the flesh are the dirt-hardened playground of the spirit of fear. When I was a kid living on Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, Texas, then the housing area had no fences, and one yard just flowed into the other. If people wanted a dog, it had to be chained up. Now we had to pass near this one freaking crazy mean dog every day on the way to school. It was scary. He would run at us, snapping, teeth showing, salivating, and he'd hit the end of his chain while flying through the air, and then do it again and again until we were out of his zone. One day my friend Ricky was testing it by standing just inches outside the dog's chain perimeter. So the dog would be mere centimeters from his face before he hit the end of his chain. He thought it would be fun. And then that dog fell to the ground. Well, that day the chain snapped. And Ricky literally lost a piece of his shoulder. Don't toy around with the spirit of fear by living stupid. That's what I'm trying to say. Living stupid is the works of the flesh. Paul and Peter both tell us that we should probably dial back a bit on certain things like murder, adultery, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, envy, strife, and road rage. They're just poking the bear. So maybe don't shoot the person who cut you off on I-15. Maybe stop hard flirting with your neighbor's wife or husband. Maybe don't hate someone who succeeded where you failed. You get the picture. If you live by the fruit of the Spirit, you will probably not murder or practice witchcraft. But if you live by the works of the flesh, suffice it to say, you won't be enjoying the fruit of the Spirit, nor will you notice the Spirit of God in operation as much. You may witness it, but not as much. Behavior and mindset are either the devil's playground or God's country. You choose. You choose. God won't live your gift, your passion, your why for you. He won't love people for you, nor will he make you get off the couch and practice. We all know this. Paul boils down all the fruit of the Spirit into 3 words: power, love, sound mind. Power is the strength to do more than you thought you could do. It's where miracles happen. It's up to us to master our own special power, our own special sauce, our gift, our passion, the thing that makes us tick. Sure, God helps us, but we must be willing to live it. We light things up regardless of the spirit of fear. Our love must be bigger than our fear. We love our special power more than the pay or consequences. We learn to love what we do through thick and thin. Through good times and bad times. We decide to love when the haters troll. We love what we're called to do. In fact, we love what we do so much that it doesn't matter what anyone else says or does. We outlove the spirit of fear. A sound mind is driving our mind to keep moving when everything is telling us to stop. We just keep pushing. Just keep pushing. We build and maintain a mindset that's so sound, so strong, so focused, so well practiced, so disciplined that stuff just gets done. We outpace and outwork the spirit of fear. We keep showing up day after day after day. We simply wear fear out. That's power. We live our love in rain, shine, or under the cover of darkness. That's love. We decide to keep doing what we love to do with no applause and no apologies. Sound mind. That's how we beat back fear. Now, to wrap it all up, the spirit of fear's only job is to stop you from doing what you were put on this earth to do. The only way to beat it is to keep loving. To fail and to get back up and to keep moving. You just never stop. Oh, and don't forget to keep enjoying your hobbies and passion projects along the way. Without those, you won't keep going for any length of time. It's true. Most of you know that. Paul was just trying to get Timothy to get back in the car and drive. He'd already been living strong for 25 years, but now life was getting to him. And did I share the story about the zoo? Did I share that today? No? Well, I want to throw this in here now. I should have done it a little bit earlier, but I forgot. When I was a kid, my mom took my brother and I to the Colorado Springs Zoo. And while she wasn't looking, I slipped away. And when she finally saw me again, I was wandering around in the giraffe enclosure. These freckled monsters, 15 feet tall, and a little chubby red-headed kid is wandering around in there. Well, a park staff had to come and get me out of there. Well, the next time I went, next time she went to the zoo, she had me on a freaking leash. I mean, I was like a dog, you know? And, you know, but that leash, you know, I mean, she had to protect me from myself. And sometimes, you know, we need the word, we need each other to protect ourselves from ourselves. So, you know, Paul wanted to protect Timothy's gift by teaching him how to handle this with power, love, and of a sound mind. You know, he had to get him to reconsider his life choices, his passion, his calling. Paul wanted Timothy to remember how he had thrived for years before he allowed fear to freeze him. Well, the same is true for us. We can strike fear into the spirit of fear. Let's back to doing what we were put on earth to do. The world needs your gift. You do this by relentlessly living your power, your purpose, and your passion. You know, all the while injecting your life with love. Let's jump back in and drive. Let's beat back the spirit of fear. And now, let's all get out of here. The leash is off. Adventure awaits. God bless you all.